The summer heat was brutal that Tuesday afternoon, the kind that made the asphalt shimmer and turned the garage into an oven. Tyra wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of grease across her dark skin. She didn't care. She was too focused on the transmission laid out in front of her, each part carefully organized on the workbench like pieces of a puzzle only she knew how to solve. 3 years. That's how long she'd been working at Patterson's Auto and Motorcycle Repair. 3 long years of proving herself every single day. When she first walked through those doors, the other mechanics had looked at her like she was lost, like maybe she was there to drop off her car or pick up her boyfriend. The idea that she actually knew her way around an engine, that took them months to accept. But Tyra had learned to let her work speak for itself. She was 26 now, and she could diagnose engine problems just by listening to them run. She could feel when something was off balance, sense when a part was about to fail. It was more than training. It was instinct, something she'd inherited from her late father who used to fix cars in their driveway every weekend. She was the only black woman mechanic in the entire county. Sometimes that made her proud. Other times, like when customers asked to speak to a real mechanic, it just made her tired. But she kept showing up, kept proving herself, because this was more than just a job. This was her passion, her skill, and frankly, she needed the money. Her younger brother was in community college, trying to make something of himself. After their mother died 2 years back from cancer, Tyra became the one holding everything together. Every paycheck was carefully divided: rent, utilities, groceries, her brother's books, and if there was anything left over, maybe she'd add a new tool to her collection. She'd built up quite a set over the years, each wrench and socket representing hours of overtime and careful saving. The rumble started as a distant thunder, growing louder with each passing second. Tyra looked up from her work, wiping her hands on her coveralls. She knew that sound. Every gearhead within 100 miles knew that sound. A Harley-Davidson, and from the irregular sputtering mixed in with the roar, it was a Harley in serious trouble. The bike limped into the parking lot like a wounded animal. The engine cut out with a sad cough, and the rider kicked down the stand. Tyra's eyes went wide. The man climbing off that bike was massive, easily 6'3", with arms covered in ink from shoulder to wrist. But it wasn't his size that made everyone in the shop suddenly find reasons to be busy elsewhere. It was the vest he wore, leather and worn, with patches that told a very specific story. The biggest patch, the one across his back that Tyra caught a glimpse of, featured a skull with wings. Hell's Angels. Her boss, Jim Patterson, appeared from his office so fast you'd think the building was on fire. Jim was a stocky man in his 50s, the kind of guy who thought he knew everything about everything. He'd owned this shop for 20 years, and he ran it like a kingdom where his word was law. "Tyra," Jim hissed, grabbing her elbow and pulling her toward the back of the garage. "Stay back here. I'll handle this one." "But Jim, I'm in the middle of—" "I don't care what you're in the middle of," he cut her off, his voice low and urgent. "Just stay out of sight. We don't need any trouble here. You understand what I'm saying?" Tyra understood perfectly. Jim was scared. Terrified, actually. She could see it in the way his hands trembled slightly, in the way he kept glancing back at the biker who was now walking toward the garage entrance. The other mechanics had made themselves scarce too. Tommy had suddenly remembered he needed parts from the supply room. Dave was very interested in organizing the tool wall, but Tyra didn't scare easy. She stepped back like Jim wanted, but she didn't leave. She watched from near the tire rack as Jim approached the customer with a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Good afternoon, sir. What seems to be the problem with your bike?" The biker removed his sunglasses, revealing surprisingly calm brown eyes. His face was weathered, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. When he spoke, his voice was deep and measured. "Started losing power about 20 miles back. Now she's misfiring, won't hold idle, and smells like she's running way too rich. You know Harleys?" "Know them?" Jim laughed, but it sounded forced. "Sir, I've been working on motorcycles since before you were born. Let me take a look." Tyra watched as Jim popped the seat and started poking around. She could tell from where she stood that he was out of his depth. He was checking the obvious things: spark plugs, fuel lines, air filter. Basic stuff. But this problem wasn't basic. She could hear it in the way the engine had sounded when it pulled in, could smell it in the mixture of fuel and electrical burning that still hung in the air. 15 minutes passed, then 30, then an hour. Jim was sweating now, and not just from the heat. He'd pulled off the carburetor and was staring at it like it might suddenly explain itself. The biker stood with his arms crossed, his patience clearly wearing thin. "How much longer?" the biker asked. "Just need to." "I'm almost—" Jim fumbled with a wrench, dropping it on the concrete with a clang that made him jump. "These newer models, they're complicated, you know. Lots of electronics." "It's a 2019, the biker said flatly. "And you've been looking at the carburetor for 20 minutes. "That's not where the problem is." Tyra bit her lip. She knew exactly where the problem was. The symptoms pointed to a voltage regulator issue combined with a clogged jet in the carburetor. The electrical problem was causing the misfiring, while the fuel mixture issue was causing the rich smell and the inability to idle. It was actually a fairly common problem on this model year if you knew what to look for. But Jim was too panicked to think straight and too proud to ask for help. The biker pulled out his phone and started typing. "What's the nearest shop from here?" Wait, Jim said quickly. "I just need a few more minutes. I've almost got it figured out." "You said that half an hour ago." The biker's voice dropped lower, taking on an edge that made even Tyra's stomach tighten. "I've got places to be. My brothers are waiting on me. Now either you fix this bike in the next 10 minutes or I'm taking it to someone who knows what they're doing. And trust me, I'll make sure everyone I know hears about this place." That was a threat, plain and simple. In the motorcycle community, word of mouth was everything. One bad review from this guy could spread like wildfire, especially if his brothers were who Tyra thought they were. Jim's face had gone from red to pale. "Sir, please, I'm doing my best here." "Your best isn't good enough." That's when Tyra made her decision. She could lose her job for this. Jim had given her a direct order to stay back. But she couldn't watch this disaster unfold anymore, and more importantly, she couldn't let a fellow rider leave with a broken bike when she knew she could fix it. She stepped out from behind the tire rack and walked straight toward the bike. Jim's eyes went wide when he saw her approach. "Tyra, what are you— Get back!" She ignored him. Instead, she looked at the biker directly. "Mind if I take a look?" The man's eyebrows rose slightly. He looked her up and down, not in a disrespectful way, but like he was reassessing the situation entirely. After a moment, he nodded. "Can't hurt at this point." Jim grabbed her arm. "Tyra, I told you to stay in the back. This is not your job right now." She pulled her arm free, gently but firmly. "You want to save this shop's reputation or not?" Before Jim could respond, she was already kneeling next to the Harley. She didn't rush. She started the way her father taught her, by listening. She turned the key to accessory mode, not starting the engine, just powering up the electrical system. She heard the fuel pump prime, watched the dash lights, listened to the relay clicks. "When did you first notice the problem?" she asked the biker. "About 30 miles into my ride. Started subtle, just a small hesitation on acceleration. And it got progressively worse, right? Not all at once?" "Yeah, exactly," Tyra nodded. She pulled out her multimeter from her belt. She always kept one handy. And started testing the voltage at different points in the electrical system. The biker watched with interest now, his arms uncrossed. Even Jim had gone quiet, though he looked like he wanted to drag her away from the bike. "Your voltage regulator is fried," she said after a few minutes. "It's not maintaining consistent voltage to your ignition system, which is causing the misfiring. But that's not your only problem." She moved to the carburetor that Jim had partially disassembled. Without asking permission, she pulled it completely free and held it up to the light. "See this jet here? It's partially clogged. That's why you're running rich and can't hold an idle. The electrical problem probably stressed the fuel system, made it run weird, and carbon buildup blocked this jet." The biker leaned in closer. "Can you fix it?" "Both problems?" "Yeah, I'll need to replace the voltage regulator. I've got a compatible one in stock. The jet I can clean out, but you might want to replace it in the next few months. Give me about 45 minutes. Tyra, I need to talk to you now." Jim's voice shook with barely controlled anger. She stood up, meeting his eyes. "After I fix the bike." "No, now." The biker held up a hand. "Actually, I'd prefer if the lady finishes what she started. She's the first person who seems to know what they're talking about." Jim opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. He looked like a fish gasping for air. Finally, he just stalked off to his office and slammed the door. Tyra got to work. She moved with confidence, her hands steady and sure. First, she replaced the voltage regulator, carefully connecting each wire and testing the voltage output. Perfect. Then she cleaned the carburetor jet using a tiny wire and carburetor cleaner. reassembled everything and made sure every connection was tight. The biker watched the entire process. At one point, he asked a question about her technique and she explained it. He nodded appreciatively. No condescension. No surprise that she knew what she was doing. Just respect between one rider and another. 42 minutes after she started, Tyra turned the key and hit the starter. The engine roared to life, smooth and powerful, like it was brand new. No misfiring. No sputtering. Just pure, beautiful mechanical harmony. She let it idle for a few minutes, checking her work, making sure everything was stable. The biker watched the tachometer hold steady at a perfect idle. A slow smile spread across his scarred face. "That's what I'm talking about," he said. "That's my girl singing again." Tyra shut off the engine and stood up, wiping her hands on a rag. "You should be good to go. Keep an eye on your electrical system, though. Sometimes when a voltage regulator fails, it can cause problems down the line. If you notice any weird dimming of lights or electrical glitches, bring it back in. How much do I owe you?" Before Tyra could answer, Jim emerged from his office. He'd apparently decided to pretend like everything was fine. "That'll be $300 for parts and labor." The biker pulled out a wallet thick with cash. Without counting, he peeled off $600 bills and handed them to Jim. "That's for the estimate. This is for her." He pulled out another $300 and held it out to Tyra. She hesitated. "Tips like this didn't happen. Not in this shop, not in this town." "Take it," the biker said. "You earned it. What's your name?" "Tyra." "Tyra, good work." He extended his hand. She shook it and his grip was firm but not crushing. "Name's Reaper." "Reaper, got it." He climbed onto his bike, started it up, and sat there for a moment, listening to his engine run. Then he looked at Jim. "You've got a hell of a mechanic here. You should treat her better." With that, he kicked the bike into gear and rolled out of the garage. The rumble of his Harley faded into the distance, leaving behind nothing but the smell of exhaust and the tension hanging thick in the air. Tyra turned to face her boss. She knew what was coming. She could see it in the rigid set of his shoulders, in the way his jaw clenched, but she'd made her choice and she wouldn't take it back. "My office," Jim said quietly. "Right now." As she followed him across the garage, Tyra caught Tommy watching from the supply room doorway. He gave her a small nod, something that might have been respect. Dave wouldn't meet her eyes at all. She walked into that office knowing everything was about to change. She just didn't know yet how much. Jim's office smelled like old coffee and motor oil, with a hint of the cheap air freshener he kept plugged into the wall that never quite managed to cover up the other smells. Tyra had been in this office plenty of times before, usually for good reasons, like when she'd landed a big repair job or figured out a problem that had stumped everyone else. But standing there now, watching Jim settle into his worn leather chair behind the desk, she knew this conversation was going to be different. He didn't say anything at first, just sat there, his fingers drumming on the desk, his face still red from anger or embarrassment or both. Tyra stood with her arms at her sides, waiting. She wasn't going to apologize. She'd done the right thing, and they both knew it. Finally, Jim spoke. "What part of stay in the back did you not understand?" "I understood it just fine," Tyra said calmly. "But that bike needed to be fixed, and you weren't fixing it. That's not your call to make." Jim's voice rose, and he slammed his hand on the desk. "I'm the owner. I'm the boss. When I give you a direct order, you follow it. That's how this works. Even when following that order means losing a customer, even when it means destroying the shop's reputation. That's not—" Jim stopped himself, took a breath. "You don't understand the situation here. You don't understand who those people are." "Those people?" Tyra raised an eyebrow. "You mean the customer who just paid double your estimate and left happy? That person? He's a Hell's Angel, Tyra. Do you have any idea what that means? Do you understand what kind of trouble we could get into having them come around here?" Tyra crossed her arms. "He brought in a broken bike. I fixed it. He paid, he left. I don't see the trouble." "Of course you don't see it," Jim said, his voice dripping with frustration. "You never see the big picture. You just do whatever you want, consequences be damned. What if other customers had been here? What if someone saw that bike, saw that vest, and decided they didn't want to bring their business here anymore?" "Then they're idiots," Tyra shot back. "A customer is a customer. His money spends the same as anyone else's." Jim stood up, leaning forward with his palms flat on the desk. "I told you to stay back. I gave you a direct order and you ignored me. You made me look like a fool in front of a customer. You undermined my authority in my own shop. I saved your reputation, Tyra countered. If he'd left here with a broken bike, if he'd told his friends that Patterson's couldn't fix a simple voltage regulator problem, you'd have lost way more business than you're worried about now. That's not the point. Then what is the point, Jim? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're more worried about what people might think than about doing good work. The silence that followed was heavy. Jim sat back down slowly, his chair creaking under his weight. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but somehow more final. You're fired. The words hung in the air like smoke. Tyra felt them hit her chest, but she kept her face neutral. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her panic. Fired, she repeated. For fixing a bike and making you money. For insubordination. For failing to follow direct orders. For creating a situation that could have put this business at risk. Jim pulled out a desk drawer and grabbed a checkbook. I'll pay you through today, plus any overtime you're owed. But I need you to clear out your toolbox and leave. Now. You're serious. Dead serious. He started writing the check, his pen scratching across the paper. I can't have someone working here who doesn't respect the chain of command. If you won't follow my instructions on something this important, how can I trust you with anything else? Tyra felt anger rising in her throat like bile, but she swallowed it down. Getting angry wouldn't change anything. Jim had made up his mind, and she could see it in the set of his jaw, in the way he wouldn't quite meet her eyes. This wasn't really about insubordination. This was about fear. Fear of the Hells Angels. Fear of what people would think. And maybe, just maybe, fear that she'd shown him up in front of everyone. Fine, she said quietly. I'll get my things. Jim tore the check from the book and held it out. Tyra took it without looking at the amount. She turned and walked out of the office, her boots echoing on the concrete floor of the garage. Tommy and Dave were pretending to work on their respective projects, but Tyra could feel their eyes on her. Neither of them said anything. Neither of them came to her defense or asked what happened. They just watched as she walked to her workstation, to the large red toolbox that had been her pride and joy for 3 years. She opened the top drawer and started pulling out her tools. Each socket, each wrench, each screwdriver had a story. The torque wrench she'd bought after her first big paycheck. The specialty tools she'd slowly collected, sacrificing meals out or new clothes to add to her collection. The digital multimeter her father had given her the year before he died, with his initials scratched into the back. 3 years of her life, packed into a toolbox. The worst part was the silence. Nobody spoke. Nobody said goodbye or wished her luck or told her they were sorry to see her go. The garage just kept operating like she'd never been there at all, like she was already a ghost. It took her 20 minutes to pack everything up. Her toolbox was heavy, and she had to make 2 trips to get it all to her truck. On her second trip, carrying a milk crate full of miscellaneous parts and personal items, Tommy finally approached her. Hey, he said quietly, glancing back toward Jim's office. That was some impressive work you did on that bike. Thanks, Tyra said flatly. Look, I'm sorry about how this went down. It's not right. But you're not going to say that to Jim, are you? Tommy looked uncomfortable. I've got a family to feed, Tyra. I can't afford to lose this job. Right. She adjusted her grip on the crate. Take care of yourself, Tommy. She loaded the last of her things into her truck and climbed into the driver's seat. Before she started the engine, she let herself have one moment. One moment to feel the weight of what just happened. She'd been fired. She was unemployed. And she had no idea how she was going to pay rent next week, or how she was going to help her brother with his textbooks, or what she was going to do with her life now. Then she started the engine and drove away from Patterson's auto and motorcycle repair for the last time. The drive home felt longer than usual. Tyra's duplex was in an older neighborhood, nothing fancy but clean and safe. She'd lived there for 2 years, always paid her rent on time, always kept the place neat. The landlord liked her, but liking her wouldn't mean much if she couldn't make rent. She pulled into her driveway and sat there for a minute, staring at her front door. Inside, she'd have to face reality. She'd have to figure out her next move, start making phone calls, send out resumes. But out here in her truck, she could pretend for just a little longer that everything was fine. Her phone buzzed. A text from her brother, Devin. Hey sis, any chance you can swing by the bookstore this week? Professor added another textbook to the required list. It's $120. I'm sorry, I know it's a lot. Tyra closed her eyes. $120. Last week that would have been annoying but manageable. Today it felt like a mountain. She texted back, I'll figure something out. Don't worry about it, but she was worrying. She was worrying enough for both of them. Inside her duplex, Tyra set her toolbox down in the corner of her small living room and pulled out her laptop. She spent the next 3 hours updating her resume, searching for job openings, and sending out applications to every auto shop and motorcycle repair place within a 50-mile radius. By evening, she'd sent out 17 applications. She felt exhausted, wrung out like she'd been working a double shift, but she forced herself to keep going, making a list of places she could call in the morning to follow up. The next day started early. Tyra was up at 6, coffee in hand, phone charged and ready. She started making calls at 8, as soon as she figured businesses would be open. The first shop she called, Mike's Auto Repair, said they weren't hiring. The second shop, Precision Motors, said they'd keep her resume on file. The third shop, Randy's Garage, asked if she had any dealership experience. When she said no, they told her they were looking for someone with more specialized training. By lunch, she'd called 12 places. None of them had anything available. A few were polite about it. A couple weren't. One shop owner had the nerve to suggest she try applying at the parts store instead, like working behind a counter was more appropriate for her than actually fixing cars. On the 4th day of job hunting, Tyra started to suspect something was wrong. She was qualified. She had 3 years of solid experience. Her resume was good. So why was every shop in the area suddenly not hiring, or looking for someone with different experience, or just generally uninterested? She got her answer when she ran into Carlos at the grocery store. Carlos was a mechanic she knew from a shop across town. They'd met at a few industry meetups, had always been friendly. Hey, Tyra, Carlos said, looking uncomfortable when he spotted her. I heard what happened at Patterson's. Yeah, well, Jim and I had a disagreement about how to run the business. Carlos glanced around like he was worried someone might overhear. Look, I'm going to be straight with you because I think you deserve to know. Jim's been making calls around town. He's been telling people that you're difficult to work with, that you don't follow instructions, that you caused problems with dangerous customers. Tyra felt her stomach drop. He's blackballing me. I don't know if I'd call it that, but yeah, basically, my boss got a call from him. A few other shops too. I'm really sorry, Tyra. It's not right, but that's what's happening. After Carlos walked away, Tyra abandoned her grocery shopping and just sat in her truck in the parking lot. Jim wasn't just content with firing her. He was actively trying to destroy any chance she had of finding work in the area. He was using his connections, his reputation, his 20 years as a business owner to make sure no one would hire her. That evening, Tyra sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, her bills spread out in front of her. Rent was due in 4 days. She had enough in savings to cover it, but just barely. After that, she'd have maybe 2 weeks before things got really desperate. Her phone buzzed with another text from Devin. Hey, did you see the bookstore is having a sale? Textbook is only $95 now. I can try to pick up some extra shifts at the coffee shop to help. Tyra texted back. Don't worry about it. Focus on your studies. I've got it covered. But she didn't have it covered. Not even close. She opened her laptop and started expanding her job search. Maybe she'd have to look outside the area. Maybe she'd have to consider moving. Though the thought of uprooting Devin from his college made her feel sick. Maybe she'd have to take whatever work she could find, even if it wasn't in automotive. On the 5th day, Tyra woke up feeling hollowed out. She'd sent out 32 applications, made 40-some phone calls, and had exactly 0 promising leads. She'd been rejected, ignored, and dismissed more times in 5 days than in her entire career. She was sitting at her kitchen table, trying to figure out if she could afford to eat something other than ramen noodles for dinner, when she heard it, that sound, the rumble of motorcycles, deep and powerful, growing louder as they got closer. Not just one bike. Multiple bikes, their engines creating a symphony that made her chest vibrate even through the walls of her duplex. Tyra got up and walked to her window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to see out. Her driveway was filling up with motorcycles. Big ones. All Harleys, all customized, all ridden by men wearing leather vests with those same patches she'd seen on Reaper. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bikes total. They parked in formation, killed their engines, and the sudden silence was almost as overwhelming as the noise had been. Reaper was leading the group. He pulled off his helmet and hung it on his handlebars, then looked directly at her window. Even from inside the house, Tyra could see him nod, like he knew she was watching. Her heart was pounding. What were they doing here? How did they even know where she lived? And more importantly, was she in danger? She considered not answering the door, considered calling the police, considered climbing out her back window and running, but something stopped her. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the fact that she had nothing left to lose. Or maybe it was the memory of Reaper's respectful handshake. The way he'd watched her work with genuine interest. The way he'd told Jim that he should treat her better. Tyra walked to her front door, took a deep breath and opened it. All 7 men were standing in her driveway. Arms crossed, faces serious. They looked intimidating as hell, she wouldn't lie about that. But they weren't acting threatening. They were just waiting. Reaper stepped forward. "Afternoon, Tyra. Mind if we talk for a minute?" She stepped out onto her small porch, leaving the door open behind her in case she needed to make a quick retreat. "How did you know where I live?" Asked around. People talk. He tilted his head slightly. "Heard you got fired. Heard it happened the day after you fixed my bike. Heard your boss has been running his mouth around town, making it hard for you to find work." Tyra's eyes widened. "How do you know all that?" One of the other men, a guy with a long gray beard, spoke up. "We know a lot of mechanics. Got friends at most of the shops around here. Word travels fast, especially when it's about someone who did right by one of us." "I was just doing my job," Tyra said quietly. "And you got punished for it," Reaper said. "That doesn't sit right with us. So we did some checking, learned about your situation. You got a brother in school, rent coming due, no job prospects because your former boss is a vindictive coward. That about sum it up?" Tyra didn't answer, but her silence was answer enough. Reaper glanced back at his crew, then looked at Tyra again. "We've got a proposition for you. You interested in hearing it or you want us to leave?" "I'm listening," Tyra said, because really, what did she have to lose? "We run a legitimate business. Custom motorcycle garage called Iron Phoenix. Restoration, custom builds, repairs, the whole deal. Our head mechanic retired 6 months ago. Moved to Arizona to be near his grandkids. We've been limping along with part-time help, but we need someone full-time. Someone who knows what they're doing. Someone who's not afraid of hard work." "You're offering me a job," Tyra said slowly. "Lead mechanic position. Salary is 30% more than you were making at Patterson's plus full benefits. Health insurance, dental, the works. And you get a cut of any custom jobs you lead. Some of our clients pay serious money for custom work." Tyra stared at him. This had to be some kind of joke. Or a trap or something. Things like this didn't just happen, especially not to her. "Why?" she asked. "You don't know me. You saw me work on one bike." "That's true," Reaper acknowledged. "But I know quality when I see it. You diagnosed my problem in 5 minutes when your boss couldn't figure it out in 2 hours. You fixed it in less than 45 minutes and my bike's been running perfect ever since. That tells me you're good at what you do. But there's got to be other mechanics who aren't afraid to work with us," the gray-bearded man interrupted. "Who won't treat us like we're criminals the second we walk through the door. Who actually respect the work and respect the bikes." Reaper held up a hand. "There is one condition. You've got to be comfortable working around us. We're in and out of the shop all the time. Some of our brothers bring their personal bikes in. We host club meetings in the building sometimes. If that's going to be a problem, we need to know now." Tyra looked at the 7 men standing in her driveway. They looked rough. They looked dangerous. Society would tell her to be scared, to say no, to slam the door and call the police. But society had also told her she couldn't be a mechanic because she was a woman. Society had told her she'd never be as good as the men. Society had put up barriers at every turn, and these men, these supposedly dangerous outlaws, were offering her a lifeline when no one else would. "When do I start?" Tyra asked. Reaper smiled, a genuine smile that made the scar through his eyebrow crinkle. "How about Monday? Give you the weekend to settle your affairs, say your goodbyes, whatever you need to do." "Monday works." "Good. I'll text you the address." Reaper pulled out his phone. "What's your number?" She gave it to him, still half convinced this was all some weird dream. He sent her a pin with the shop's location. As the bikers mounted their rides and started their engines, Reaper looked back at her one more time. "Welcome to Iron Phoenix, Tyra. Something tells me you're going to fit right in." They rode off in formation, the rumble of their engines fading into the distance, leaving Tyra standing on her porch trying to process what had just happened. Her phone buzzed. A text from Devin. "Don't worry about the textbook. I'll figure something out." Tyra smiled for the first time in 5 days. She texted back, "Actually, I just got a new job. Better pay, better benefits. Get whatever books you need. It's covered." She walked back inside her duplex and looked at her toolbox sitting in the corner. Monday morning, she'd load it into her truck and drive to Iron Phoenix to a new job working for a motorcycle club of all things. Life was strange. But maybe, just maybe, it was about to get a whole lot better. Monday morning came faster than Tyra expected. She'd spent the weekend in a strange mix of excitement and nerves, alternating between confidence that she'd made the right choice and absolute terror that she was walking into something she didn't understand. Devin had been thrilled when she told him about the new job, though she'd left out the part about exactly who her new employers were. He didn't need to worry. Iron Phoenix was located on the outskirts of town, in an industrial area Tyra had driven past 100 times, but never really paid attention to. The building was huge, a converted warehouse with a fresh coat of paint, dark gray with orange accents that actually looked pretty sharp. A massive sign hung above the main entrance featuring a phoenix rising from flames, its wings spread wide. Underneath, in bold letters, "Iron Phoenix Custom Motorcycles." Tyra pulled her truck into the parking lot at 7:30, a full 30 minutes before she was supposed to arrive. Better early than late, especially on the first day. The lot was already half full with motorcycles of every style and size. Harleys mostly, but she spotted a few custom choppers, a beautiful vintage Indian, and even a couple of sport bikes. She sat in her truck for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, giving herself a little pep talk. "You can do this. You're good at what you do.
They offered you this job because they believe in you."
Just go in there and show them they made the right choice." The main entrance led into a showroom that took Tyra's breath away. 3 custom motorcycles sat on raised platforms under spotlights, each one a work of art. One was a lowrider with candy apple red paint and chrome that gleamed like jewelry. Another was a cafe racer with a matte black finish and copper accents. The third was a full bagger, customized within an inch of its life with airbrushed murals of mountains and eagles covering every panel. Beautiful, aren't they? Tyra turned to find a woman approaching her, maybe in her mid-40s with short dark hair streaked with silver and kind eyes. She wore jeans and a black Iron Phoenix t-shirt, and she moved with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable in her space. "They're incredible," Tyra said honestly. "I've never seen work this clean. That's what we do here. Excellence or nothing." The woman extended her hand. "I'm Rita. I handle the books, scheduling, customer relations, all the boring stuff that keeps this place running. You must be Tyra." "That's me." They shook hands and Rita's grip was firm and warm. "Reaper told me you'd be starting today. Come on, I'll give you the tour and get you set up." Rita led her through the showroom into the main garage area, and Tyra had to stop herself from gasping out loud. The space was massive, with high ceilings, excellent lighting, and more equipment than she'd ever seen in one place. There were 4 full-size motorcycle lifts, complete sets of tools on rolling carts, a paint booth that looked state-of-the-art, a welding station, a dyno for tuning, and workbenches that ran along 2 entire walls. 3 men were already working on various bikes. One was completely rebuilding an engine, parts carefully organized around him. Another was doing custom fabrication work on a fuel tank, sparks flying from his welding torch. The third was hunched over a laptop connected to a motorcycle, doing some kind of computer diagnostics. "We've got 5 full bays," Rita explained. 2 for custom builds, 2 for repairs and maintenance, and 1 for restoration work. That's where we take old bikes and bring them back to life. The restoration projects are Reaper's favorite. "This is amazing," Tyra said, running her hand along one of the clean workbenches. "I've never worked in a shop this well equipped." Reaper believes in having the right tools for the job. "If you need something we don't have, you tell me and I'll order it. No point in having talented mechanics if they don't have what they need to do good work." Rita showed her the parts room, which was organized with a precision that would make a military supply sergeant proud. Every part had its place, every shelf was labeled, and there was an inventory system on a computer that tracked everything coming in and going out. "We run a tight ship here," Rita explained. Might not look like it from the outside, given who owns the place, but this is a real business. We pay our taxes, we follow the rules, we treat our customers right. Some people have trouble believing that, but it's the truth. They walked back into the main garage and Rita led Tyra to a workstation in the corner. It had its own toolbox, a massive professional-grade unit, a rolling cart, and a dedicated lift. Someone had put a laminated name placard on the workbench. Tyra Johnson, lead mechanic. "This is your space," Rita said. "The toolbox is yours to use, but if you prefer your own tools, that's fine too. We've got a staff fridge in the break room. Coffee's always fresh, and we usually order lunch as a group around noon. Any questions so far?" Tyra had about 1,000,000 questions, but she settled on the most important one. "What's my first project?" Rita grinned. "I like your attitude. Actually, Reaper wanted to talk to you before you got started. He's in his office. Come on." Reaper's office was at the back of the building, up a set of metal stairs that led to a second-floor space overlooking the entire garage. The office had windows on 3 sides, giving a clear view of every workbay below. Smart design. He could see everything happening in his shop without having to constantly walk around. Reaper was sitting behind a desk that looked comically small compared to his large frame. He was studying a set of blueprints, making notes with a pencil. When Rita knocked on the open door, he looked up and smiled. "Tyra, right on time. Actually early. I appreciate that." He stood and gestured to a chair. "Have a seat." "Rita, thanks for showing her around." "No problem. I'll be downstairs if you need me." Rita headed back down the stairs. Tyra sat and Reaper settled back into his chair. For a moment, they just looked at each other, and Tyra got the sense he was sizing her up, trying to figure out who she really was beyond the mechanic who'd fixed his bike. "I want to be straight with you about something," Reaper said finally. "This shop means everything to me and my brothers. We built it from nothing, poured our hearts into it, and we've worked hard to make it legitimate and respected. But we still get people who judge us before they even walk through the door. They see the patches, they see who we are, and they make assumptions." "I understand," Tyra said. "I don't think you do, not completely. What I'm saying is, you're going to face some challenges here that have nothing to do with your ability as a mechanic. Some customers are going to see a black woman working in a shop run by Hell's Angels, and they're not going to handle it well. They might say things. They might request a different mechanic. They might make assumptions about you that are flat out wrong." Tyra felt her spine straighten. "I've dealt with that my whole career. I'm sure you have. But here's the difference. Here, we've got your back. Someone disrespects you, they're done. They don't get to come back. We don't tolerate that here, not from anyone. Your job is to do excellent work. Our job is to make sure you can do that work without anyone giving you grief. Deal?" Something loosened in Tyra's chest. A tension she'd been carrying so long she'd forgotten it was there. "Deal." Reaper slid the blueprints across the desk. "This is your first project. Client wants a full custom build. It's a 1976 Harley shovelhead that's been sitting in his garage for 20 years. He wants us to restore the engine, upgrade the electrical system, custom paint job, new suspension, the works. Budget is $30,000. Timeline is 3 months. You'll be the lead, which means you coordinate with our fabricator, our painter, and our parts supplier. You make the calls on what needs to be done. Think you can handle it?" Tyra studied the blueprints, her mind already working through the project. A shovelhead in that condition would need a complete teardown and rebuild. The electrical system on those old bikes was notoriously finicky. The suspension would require custom work. But it was doable. More than doable, it was exciting. "I can handle it," she said with confidence. "Good. Because if this goes well, we've got 3 more custom builds lined up behind it. Word's getting out that we do quality work, and business is picking up. We need someone who can deliver excellence consistently. That's why you're here." Over the next few weeks, Tyra settled into her new role at Iron Phoenix, and it was nothing like she'd expected. The work itself was challenging in the best way possible. The shovelhead project demanded every bit of her skill and creativity. She spent hours carefully disassembling the engine, cataloging every part, determining what could be saved and what needed to be replaced. But more than the work, it was the atmosphere that surprised her. Despite, or maybe because of, who ran the place, Iron Phoenix operated like a well-oiled machine. Everyone had their role, everyone respected each other's space, and the quality of work that came out of that garage was consistently outstanding. The other mechanics accepted her immediately. There was Leo, the engine specialist who could rebuild anything with pistons. There was Cruz, the fabricator who could bend metal into shapes that seemed impossible. And there was old Bobby, who'd been building bikes longer than Tyra had been alive and had forgotten more about motorcycles than most people would ever know. They didn't treat her like a diversity hire or a charity case. They treated her like a colleague, someone who'd earned her spot through skill. When she had a question, they answered it. When she had an idea, they listened. And when she proved she could deliver quality work, they respected her for it. The club members themselves were in and out of the shop constantly. Some brought their personal bikes in for maintenance. Others just stopped by to hang out, drink coffee, and shoot the breeze. At first, Tyra was nervous around them. There were a lot of them, maybe 30 or 40 guys who seemed to treat Iron Phoenix like a second home, but they were surprisingly normal. Sure, they looked intimidating with their leather vests and their patches and their generally rough appearance, but they asked about her day. They complimented her work. They treated her with a respect that felt genuine, not performative. One afternoon, about 3 weeks into her new job, a club member named Diesel brought in his bike with a weird rattling sound. Tyra put it on the lift and started diagnosing. Diesel stood nearby, watching her work. "Can I ask you something?" he said after a while. "Sure," Tyra replied, checking the primary chain tension. "Why'd you take this job? I mean, no offense, but you had to know what people would think, working here with us. That doesn't scare you?" Tyra straightened up and looked at him. Diesel was probably in his 50s with gray in his beard and laugh lines around his eyes. He didn't look threatening. He looked curious. "Honestly, I was scared at first," she admitted. "But I needed work, and you guys offered me an opportunity when no one else would. And so far, I've been treated better here than I ever was at my last job. So no, it doesn't scare me anymore." Diesel nodded slowly. "Your old boss, the one who fired you. Patterson, right?" "That's him. Word is his business is struggling. Lost a lot of customers. Some of them come here now, actually. They heard about you, about what he did, and they decided they didn't want to support someone who operates like that." Tyra felt a flicker of satisfaction at that news, though she tried not to show it. "Karma's a thing, I guess." "It is," Diesel agreed. "And so is loyalty. You did right by Reaper, fixed his bike when you didn't have to, even though it cost you your job. That matters to us. We don't forget when people do right by us." He paused, then added, "We also don't forget when people do us wrong. But that's a different conversation." The rattling in his bike turned out to be a loose heat shield. Simple fix. Took her 10 minutes. Diesel tried to pay her, but she waved him off. "Club members get a discount," she said, remembering what Rita had told her. "This one's free." As the weeks turned into a month, then 2, Tyra found herself actually looking forward to going to work each day. The Shovelhead project was coming along beautifully. She'd rebuilt the engine from the ground up, and when she test-fired it for the first time, the sound it made was pure music. The custom paint job that Cruz designed was stunning, a deep metallic blue with silver accents that caught the light perfectly. But it wasn't just the projects that made work satisfying. It was the environment. At Patterson's, she'd always felt like she had to prove herself every single day, like one mistake would confirm everyone's worst assumptions about her. Here, she felt like part of a team. When she had a tough problem, she could ask for help without feeling weak. When she had a success, people genuinely celebrated with her. One Friday afternoon, the shop was particularly busy. Tyra was working on a rush repair job. A customer needed his bike ready for a charity ride the next morning. She was racing against the clock, trying to diagnose an intermittent electrical issue that was being stubborn. The front door chimed, indicating a customer had entered the showroom. A few minutes later, Rita appeared in the garage doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "Tyra, you have a visitor." Something in Rita's tone made Tyra look up from the wiring harness she was studying. "Who is it?" "Jim Patterson." The garage went quiet. Leo stopped working on his engine rebuild. Cruz set down his welding torch. Even Bobby looked up from his laptop. They all turned to look at Tyra. Her former boss was here, in her new workplace. After everything he'd done, Tyra wiped her hands on a rag and stood up straight. "Tell him I'll be out in a minute." Rita nodded and disappeared back into the showroom. The other mechanics were still watching Tyra, clearly ready to back her up if she needed it. "You want me to come with you?" Leo asked quietly. Tyra shook her head. "No, I got this." She walked through the doorway into the showroom, and there he was. Jim Patterson, looking smaller than she remembered. He'd lost weight and there were new lines around his eyes. His clothes looked rumpled, and he had the defeated posture of a man who'd been beaten by life. "Jim," Tyra said, keeping her voice neutral, "what do you want?" He turned to face her and she saw something in his expression that looked like shame. "I wanted to talk to you to apologize." "Apologize?" Tyra crossed her arms. "That's interesting. Look, I know I don't deserve your time, but please, just hear me out." Jim glanced around the showroom, taking in the custom bikes, the professional setup, the obvious quality of everything around him. "You've done well for yourself here." "No thanks to you." "I know, and that's what I came to say. I was wrong. About everything. Firing you was the biggest mistake I've ever made in my professional life. Hell, maybe in my entire life." Tyra didn't respond, just waited for him to continue. Jim took a deep breath. "After you left, things started falling apart. Customers heard what happened and they weren't happy about it. Some of them left. Word spread that I'd blackballed you, tried to keep you from finding work, and that made it worse. Then people started hearing about the quality of work coming out of this place, started hearing that you were the lead mechanic here, and even more of my customers left." "And that's why you're here?" Tyra asked. "Because your business is failing?" "Partly," Jim admitted, "but also because I owe you an apology. What I did was wrong. I let fear control me. I was afraid of what people would think about me associating with the Hells Angels, afraid of what other customers might say, afraid of looking bad because you fixed a problem I couldn't, and I let that fear make me do something terrible to someone who was one of my best employees." Tyra studied him for a long moment. She could see the sincerity in his face, hear it in his voice. He meant what he was saying, but meaning it and making it right were two different things. "I appreciate the apology," she said finally, "but words don't undo what you did. You didn't just fire me, Jim. You tried to destroy my career. You called shops all over town and told them not to hire me. You spread lies about me. You tried to make sure I'd never work in this field again." "I know," Jim said quietly, "and I can't take that back. I can only tell you I'm sorry and that I was wrong." "Okay. You've said it, is that all?" Jim hesitated, then seemed to steel himself. "Actually, there's more. I sold the shop. Couldn't keep it afloat anymore. The new owners want to rebrand, rebuild the reputation, start fresh. They've done their research and they know you're the best mechanic in the area. They want to offer you a partnership. 40% ownership, full control over operations, excellent salary and benefits. They're even willing to set up a scholarship fund in your mother's name for young women going into automotive trades." Tyra blinked. Whatever she'd been expecting, it wasn't this. A partnership, part ownership of Patterson's, or whatever it would be called now. A scholarship in her mother's name. It was an incredible offer, the kind of opportunity most mechanics only dreamed about. She looked around the Iron Phoenix showroom. Through the windows, she could see the garage where her coworkers were pretending to work but were definitely listening to this conversation. She thought about the last 2 months, about how she'd been treated here, about the respect and loyalty she'd received.